Good morning and happy Sabbath. Before I get started, I want to give a little disclaimer. This message is about our health message from God's Word, and it's not my message, it's God's message. So if your toes hurt when you leave here this morning, take it to Him. Please don't come to me about it. He's been stepping on my toes for the last few weeks as I've been preparing for Optimize Your Brain. I've really been receiving a blessing from Dr. Nedley's programs, but it's been a lot of reminder of where I really should be with the health message in my own life. And so as I share this morning, it's from my heart because I realize that the closer I walk to the Lord's message when it comes to health, the better I feel, the clearer my mind is, the more at peace I am. And He has so many things to offer us that the closer we walk with Him, the better off we are. So here we go. How many of you attended the MindFit program recently that we put on? Yes. Did any of you find it a little disturbing? Some of the things that Alex shared with us in that program, to me, were disturbing, especially some of the early treatments that they had for mental illness, and some of the things they put people through. Like lobotomies, especially the way they went about some of them. There was electric shock therapies, ice water therapies, and there were others that to me just seemed utterly inhumane. And then he walked us through some of the institutions that the buildings are still there. He showed us pictures of some of the places that they took the insane, and honestly, they were so colorless and so stark that if you weren't already insane when you got there, it wouldn't take you many weeks to get there. So, but then he brought us up to current times and he gave us some hope, because there are people that are born with disabilities, mental and emotional disabilities, and there are some through accidents or tragedies that they deal with in life that end up with mental issues like depression and anxiety, and even some other things. That there are now a lot of talk therapy that he talked about that can help people, and as well as some of the better medications that are available that really can help people to live a pretty normal life. But one of the things more than anything that they've learned through this whole process is that nutrition and our lifestyle can play a very big part in the health of the brain. Not just the health of the body, but the way the brain functions. So when we got done that program, Pastor Stephen came to me and he said, would you please be willing to offer Optimize Your Brain? And I jumped at it because I knew that it would give me the opportunity to take the class first, to learn all that Dr. Nedley had to share. And what a blessing it has been. This will be offered, like I said, on June 25th, and then we will go right straight into a vegan cooking program that will also help to, for everyone to understand how they can approach cooking from a different perspective so that they can have a healthier lifestyle. And then after that, Sandra and I are both taking the training for Neil Nedley's depression and anxiety program. At some point after the cooking classes, we hope to bring those available to you as well. So please pray for us, because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of study, but it's a blessing in the process. The health message has been a very important thing to me ever since I became a Seventh-day Adventist and was first approached with a different idea of how to live. I grew up in a family that basically anything that crawled across your plate and died was fair game. And it was a lot of meat and gravy and potatoes and cheese and all kinds of crazy things. But it was what I knew. It was what I had grown up with. And here I was being faced with an entirely different concept of how to live. But I realized pretty quickly on that most of my grandparents had died of heart disease. And when my dad was just 68 years old, he died of congestive heart failure and complications from a severe stroke that he had had. It was hard saying goodbye and watching somebody I loved so much die like that. My oldest brother has had multiple stents installed, and he's on all kinds of heart medications, some of which may destroy his liver before he ever dies of anything else. My older sister, at age 63 or 63, had a debilitating stroke that has left her incapable of living on her own. She lives with our younger sister. And I honestly think that if my younger sister didn't take such good care of our older sister, that she would not be here at this point. She has atherosclerosis, which has required several very dangerous surgeries that have kept us in wondering if she was even going to make it through them. One of my other brothers had 6-way bypass at age 56, and he has since had a defibrillator pacemaker implanted, which last year alone brought him back to life 3 times. So as I look at the condition of the way we grew up, the things that we ate, the lifestyle that we had, and the way many of my family members have suffered unnecessarily, and that there's a better way, I've realized that I need to take that better way. Dr. Colin Campbell, I met him in Tennessee at a conference that he did, and he said that you can prevent your genes from expressing themselves if you choose a whole food, plant-based lifestyle. It's not a diet, it's a lifestyle. And thus, this wonderful church that we're a part of and its health message has helped me to make changes in my life. And I've outlived my father's age, and currently I'm on no medications, and I'm thankful for that. But do I live the lifestyle perfectly? No, I don't. Anybody that knows me knows that I don't. It's a struggle. I have to be honest. We're so conditioned as children to eat one way and live one way, and to make a complete 180 change. It's not easy sometimes, but the more support you have, the easier it is. And I have found that the closer I adhere to the lifestyle that the Lord recommends, the better I feel, the clearer my mind is, the more energy I have, and less problems I have. We as a church have really been blessed to have been given this health message. Ellen White began to have visions way back in the 1800s, showing us how we could have the greatest possible health, which came to be known as the 8 laws of health. And Loma Linda developed the acronym New Start so that it would be easy to remember these 8 laws. Nutrition, exercise, and water. Start is sunshine, temperance, air, rest, and trust in God. And of course, the greatest thing is trusting in God, that He knows what He's doing. After all, He created us. He made our bodies to live on certain fuel and live with certain conditions. After all, He placed Adam and Eve in a garden with plenty of fresh air and sunshine, fresh water, wonderful fruits to eat, lots of healthy exercise to be involved in. And every evening He walked into the garden and spent time with them. Wouldn't you love to go back to that? After Eden, you'll notice in Genesis that God added vegetables to the diet because of the healing properties that they had. And after the flood, flesh meat was added. But if you look through the genealogies, you'll find that within 7 generations, mankind went from an average lifespan of 930 plus years to 100 or less. And here we are stuck today. Many don't make it through their 60s. You also begin to read more about the diseases like depression and anxiety, strokes, gluttony, obesity, infections, blindness, women having trouble getting pregnant, and multiple other health issues. The greater the sins of the people, the more their health suffered. And that's true today. Fast forward to Daniel's day, and we see that the health message from Eden hadn't entirely been forgotten. Daniel and his 3 special friends, they weren't the only Jewish youth that had been dragged across the country to Babylon. They were among many thousand people that had been dragged to Babylon during the first invasion of Jerusalem and Judea. But what was it that made them stand out from all these other thousands of people that they were dragged across that desert with? Was it only 4 of them that cared enough about the way God had asked them to live, that took advantage of that to be 10 times stronger and smarter and more capable than the rest of those that they had been abducted with? It was their choice and their commitment to God that not only brought them through those first couple of years and made such a major difference in the way they performed, but it was the simple fruits and vegetables, grain, nuts, and seeds that had such an impact on the entire function of their mind and their body that made them stand out from everybody else in Babylon, including all the supposedly most intelligent people there that the king depended on to give him advice. The spirit of prophecy has this to offer regarding these young men. Think about this for a minute. What if Daniel and his companions had made a compromise with those heathen officers and had yielded to the pressure of the occasion by eating and drinking as was customary to the Babylonians? That single instance of departure from principle would have weakened their senses of right and their abhorrence of wrong. Indulgence of appetite would have involved the sacrifice of their physical vigor, the clearness of intellect, and spiritual power. One wrong step would probably have led to others until their connection with heaven being severed, they would have been swept away by temptation. That's what happened to Eve in the garden. all those different fruits that were available to her, all those beautiful fruits, and she chose to go over and grasp hold of the one that God had asked them not to partake of. Had these young men failed the test of appetite, we would be left today without the prophecies of Daniel and the amazing testimonies of their faith in God. But it was their lifestyle that gave them clarity of mind to determine to follow God no matter what they had to go through. In Counsels on Health, page 574, it says, if Seventh-day Adventists practice what they profess to believe, if they were sincere health reformers, they would indeed be a spectacle to the world. Boy, the devil stepped on my, or the Lord stepped on my toes when I read that. They would not only be a spectacle to the world, but also to angels and to men. And they would show a far greater zeal for the salvation of those who are ignorant of the truth. I thought that was interesting. If our minds are clearer, then God can help us to better understand that there's millions all around us who are lost and who need what we have. Greater reforms would be seen among the people who claim to be looking for the soon appearing of Christ. To think that we could stand out to the world just like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah if we made the simple choice to eat the simple foods that were the original diet for mankind and the diet recommended to the remnant people who are preparing for Christ's return. Counsels on Health, page 579 says, God's people should place themselves where they will grow in grace, being sanctified body, soul, and spirit by the truth. When they break away from all health-destroying indulgences, they will have a clearer perception of what constitutes true godliness. And what a time in the world for God's people to more clearly represent him by true godliness than now. A wonderful change will be seen in the religious experience. In other words, we will more perfectly reflect Christ to this sin-darkened world. The closer we follow God's recommended health lifestyle for us, the more we will represent him to the world. We look around the church, and in many of our own churches, we see little difference between the way we live and the way the world lives regarding health. We have all the same diseases of body, mind, and much the same diet and health practices of the world, or lack of, so to speak. What a shame when we've been given such a tremendous opportunity to show the world a better way. In doing the correlated Bible readings, I see over and over how the Lord wanted his people to stand out from the rest of the world in all ways, health-wise, spiritually, the joy that they had, the peace that they had. Others would see them and want what they have, yet all they wanted was to live as close as they could to the practices of all the surrounding nations around them. God finally had to step back and allow them to be taken into captivity by Babylon and other heathen nations, where they had a chance to see up close and personal view of what the other nations were really all about. They experienced the diseases, all the pain, all the suffering. Then they cried out to God to help them. What a blessing they could have been, what a testimony they could have shared with other nations if they had just taken God seriously and understood what a blessing he wanted to pour out on them. And I believe in these last days, He wants to pour out a special blessing, especially upon us as his remnant people. What a blessing we could experience, and what a testimony we could share with this sin-sick world if we were more like Daniel and his friends. What if we chose the simple, healthy, whole food, plant-based diet over the rich, sugar and fat-laden, standard American diet that's killing thousands every day and distorting the minds of thousands of others? I saw what that sad diet did to my own family and is still doing to my family. The study of the blue zones in National Geographic a number of years ago focused on the Adventists of Loma Linda, who had a healthy, longer than average lifespan. I was listening to one interview one day, and they were talking with a doctor who was just over 100 years old, and he had just finally given up doing surgeries at Loma Linda. Can you imagine having somebody that was 99 plus cutting you open to take care of some disease that you had? And yet that man in the interview was just as sharp as he could be. I wouldn't have hesitated. If I'd have needed his medical attention, I don't think I would have hesitated for a minute. Many there are actively working well into their 90s, and some even past 100. They are indeed a spectacle to the world and made it into National Geographic. Why? Because they've chosen to follow the health message God has given to his remnant people. But why is it just Loma Linda? We all have that health message. We've all had years to study it, to learn it, to follow it. It seems to me that people all over the world should be able to look at any Seventh-day Adventist church and say, wow, those people have something I want, I need. Why just Loma Linda? We all have the same opportunities. Councils on Health 574 says the controlling power of appetite will prove the ruin of thousands when, if they had conquered on this one point, they would have had the moral power to gain the victory over every other temptation of Satan. Wouldn't you love to be able to have the victory over every other temptation of Satan? As I've been studying, trying to become certified to facilitate the Optimize Your Brain series, I've really been convicted more deeply than ever of the connection of the body and the brain. What affects one affects the other. Dr. Nedley spends 2 of his 6 segments on nutrition and the way it impacts the function of the brain, especially the frontal lobe, which is the decision-making part and the reasoning part of our brain. The health of the frontal lobe is essential if we are ever to get through the time of trouble without compromising our faith. And I especially believe that after spending 6 weeks studying his programs. We are going to be forced to make decisions that will determine our eternal destiny. Will we stand like Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, and Daniel, or will we be willing to bow to the government demands? The health of the frontal lobe will also determine if we will fall prey to anxiety or to depression as we're faced with greater and greater trials and difficulties as we come closer to the end. Our physical health will also affect the way we are able to cope with the challenges that are ahead of us. Councils on Diets and Foods, page 132 to 33, Some do not exercise control over their appetites, but indulge taste at the expense of health. As a result, the brain is clouded, their thoughts are sluggish, and they fail to accomplish what they might have if they were self-denying and abstemious. These rob God of the physical and mental strength which might be devoted to his service if temperance were observed in all things. The thought that I could be robbing God made me pretty sad, especially as I've been reading through the prophecies of the Old Testament, and I hear God crying out to his people back in that day, please love me. Please listen to me. I don't want you to have to go through all the things I know you will have to endure if you don't. He just wants to wrap his arms around us and protect us. He loves us. He's given us laws of health, laws of life, to place his safety arms around us. And yet his people back then they wanted to live as close as they could to the nations around them. Counsels on diets and foods again. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I feel like many members of my own family, and even myself, have robbed God of all the strength and vitality that we could be using to serve him. Many today are dealing with health conditions that require medications. When faced with the no-buy, no-sell laws, what will they do? Many of those drugs are produced in countries like China and India. Like 90% of our drugs come from countries that don't even like us. They aren't exactly our best friends, are they? What if they decide someday just not to send us any more of the things that we need so bad? It's something to think about. I recently listened to a radio program about just that thing, and it really got me to thinking. Many of those conditions could be reversed by lifestyle changes. Yes, it would take more effort than just popping some pills every day to relieve the symptoms while the underlying cause isn't even addressed in many cases. Why not address the cause, restore the health where possible, and eliminate the pills altogether? There are many natural supplements that can be grown in our own gardens that would be helpful without all the negative side effects as well. I remember my dad, I think he was on 18 different medications. He didn't take a couple pills in the morning. I saw him just fill up the cup of his hand. And each one of those medications did something to affect something else so that it required another pill and another pill and another pill. And I remember my mom getting out the pill book and reading about all the issues that each pill caused that the doctor was prescribing for my dad. And it wasn't long before he was getting another pill for something that last pill was causing. Doctors Campbell, Esselstyn, Barnard, Ornish, and many others have taken patients who have been told to go home and put their affairs in order because they only had days or maybe weeks to live. I've watched many segments from some of these doctors as they've spoken with these patients, and they have turned their lives around. I remember one lady in particular, she was so close to death that I think it was Dr. Esselstyn that took care of her. And he put her on a lifestyle change and had somebody actually monitor what she was doing and hold her accountable for what she was doing. And she couldn't walk from one side of a room to another when she started. And when he was interviewing her, she was riding her bicycle 5 miles a day. It was just so cool. He showed pictures of her before, and she looked like she had already died and somebody had propped her up for the picture. And yet here she was, vibrant. It restored her heart. It restored her everything that was going on with her. Her blood pressure returned to normal. Everything about her life did a complete 180, and it was amazing to watch. I've got that program if anybody wants to see it. By replacing unhealthful practices with health-restoring practices, these people have gone from death's door to hiking, biking, going back to work, and thriving in a relatively short period of time. God's ways work. Now, I have heard another disclaimer. I know of people who have followed this study and this program right to the letter, and they have died early. But some friends of mine, Josh and Carolyn, might have give us a little bit of understanding for that. They're a homesteading family I follow on YouTube, and I've really enjoyed a lot of the classes that they have, especially on gardening and fruit raising and things like that. And they grow most all their own food, preserve it, and they also are meat eaters, but they grow all their own meat, and of course their own dairy products, eggs and milk. And they know what goes into these things. They buy organic grains, legumes, and beans to supplement what they don't grow. And yet, recently Carolyn she was experiencing some minor health issues, and she went to her doctor, who's a doctor but also very much into health and natural remedies. And the doctor did some testing and found that Carolyn was very high in glyphosate. Does anybody know what glyphosate is? It's the main ingredient for Roundup. They've never used any chemical weed killers on their homestead at all. So where did all this come from? She was off the charts. And just out of curiosity, Josh thought, well, maybe her test was wrong, so he went and got tested. And his came back off the charts for glyphosate contamination. So the doctor put them on a detox program, and Josh began to do a lot of work to figure out where these toxins were coming from, because they were eating very healthfully. He tested their water, their soil from their garden and their orchard, and he tested all the organic food items that they purchased. No traces of contamination in any of these things. So they should have been healthy, right? Then they tested the hay that they fed their cattle, and there wasn't any trace of glyphosate in any of that either. Then they tested the feed they were buying for their animals. Bingo. The results were off the chart for glyphosate contamination in the animal feed. They were poisoning their animals, unknowing to them, and then consuming the poisons secondhand. So as I was sitting there thinking about this program after I watched it, knowing how these people have 10 children, and they look young. They look healthy. The parents look young and healthy. The children all look healthy. Imagine the contaminants that we ingest when we buy all of our foods and our meats from Walmart or local grocery stores, and we don't know where they've come from or how they've been treated. So how much contamination are we getting just from the environment that we live in? It really gave me food for thought that maybe some of these people who I know have really focused on the health message in the past but have ended up with cancer or whatever, how much of that came from the world that we live in, even while they've been trying so hard. And yet, I've been praying for a friend, Sean, lately, that he very particular about the way he ate, his lifestyle. And he ended up with tumorous cancer in his throat. And he's a pastor in Virginia, and my daughter Danielle graduated with him from college. Wonderful young man. But he has responded to treatment in a way that the doctors have just been dumbfounded, because he was already healthy other than this cancerous growth in his throat. And he is recovering from something that should have killed him. So even though maybe we still might be susceptible to disease because of the world that we live in, I don't see where it would hurt to honor God by committing to eating and living the way that he has asked us to. We have ignored many of God's warnings and the counsel given to his last day people, and many of us are dealing with the consequences. Adam and Eve failed when it came to diet. The Israelites grumbled and complained all the way to the promised land because God was trying to reset their dietary habits after being slaves in Egypt for 400 years. Daniel and his friends were tested when it came to diet, and even Jesus was tempted on diet. We've been given much counsel regarding diet and health as we are making our journey toward the true promised land. Will we fail like Israel and Adam and Eve, or will we seek the Lord to give us the moral strength to obey so we can thrive and be in health as we await his return? Will we be living examples to the sick and suffering world around us, or will we join them in their practices and their diseases? How long will the Lord wait for a people who would love him enough to choose his way over the ways of man? How long he has desired to pour out the blessings he promised in Deuteronomy 28 on a people who would put him first in their lives. Are we going to be another generation to reject his counsel like Israel did? They rejected all the benefits of being his people while rejecting that counsel, yet they would continually turn and plead with him to restore them when they were faced with the consequences. Many of those consequences could have been prevented. Great Controversy says, before the final visitation of God's judgments upon the earth, there will be among the people of the Lord such a revival of primitive godliness as has not been witnessed since apostolic times. The Spirit and power of God will be poured out upon his children. At that time, many will separate themselves from those churches in which the love of this world has supplanted love for God and his word. Many, both of ministers and people, will gladly accept those great truths which God has caused to be proclaimed at this time to prepare a people for his second coming. God never forces. We talked about that in Sabbath school today. The choices are ours. The message on health is available to all of us. We need only take the time to study it for ourselves. Multitudes in this world outside of the church are adopting our health message and are reaping the rewards, while so many in the church are clinging to the sad diet handed down by well-meaning parents and grandparents and through the practices of the world. Yet there is hope for us. The concepts of Dr. Nedley's teaching in optimizing your brain aren't new. God gave them to us over 100 years ago. Daniel and his friends understood them. Neil just presents them in a way that helps us to understand what foods and lifestyle practices we can embrace to strengthen our ability to make wise choices. An optimized brain and healthier body will give us many advantages as we face the coming crisis. As I share the 6-week program beginning on June 25th, I will also be sharing healthy recipes and tips that will help to make these changes a little easier for those who maybe haven't experienced it before. It takes about 21 days. Every one of the doctors back in Tennessee who came and spoke at the college church, I met quite a number of them through a doctor that I actually worked for. Every one of them said it takes about 21 days to reboot your brain, but the benefits can be experienced in way less time than that. I hope many will join us as we go through this life-changing experience together to prepare not just our bodies and brains to be healthier, but to prepare a people to meet their Lord. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, as I've been reading your messages to your ancient Israel, and I could hear the cry in your voice, the tears in your voice, wanting so much to protect them from all the things going on in the nations round about them, the illnesses, the pain, the suffering, and they didn't want to listen. And I see, Lord, that we're running out of time here on this earth. Many of us who are already suffering as a result of things that lifestyle practices in our past, we have the opportunity to turn those things around. And those of us who haven't experienced yet have the opportunity to actually prevent those consequences, to have stronger minds and stronger bodies, to be able to represent you more perfectly to the world around us. And I pray that you would speak to our hearts and our minds today. Give us the courage and the strength, the moral fortitude, the desire in our hearts to love you and to serve you with all of our strength. Please help us to turn our lives around and to obey you in all things so that we might represent you more perfectly to the people around us. For I ask it in your name and for your honor and glory. Amen. Thank you.